Welcome everyone to Poets Time. It's May, mid-May in Glasgow, and it's a nice evening, and it's 2021. So as you have seen, if you see these Poets Time, you'll be seeing a few of them over this strange lockdown year, and they've been interesting and fun to do. So I thought since we're back, now I would try something new by inviting two guests from different parts of the country. And with me tonight, I've got Hugh McMillan, who comes from the southwest of Scotland, Lesley Benzie, originally from the northeast of Scotland, now living in Glasgow. So we're going to have a lovely chat, and we're going to have some nice poems for you to hear. I've been very lucky just getting acquainted with Hugh's poems in the last couple of weeks, and I've enjoyed that very much. So Hugh McMillan is from Penpoint. And
McMillan.
Hugh McMillan.
Aye, Hugh Miller's another sort altogether.
That's right, that's right. He's that wee soul with the cottage. Right, okay, so Hugh McMillan. Hugh McMillan, it definitely is. And he's won a vast amount of awards, so what I can see, and he's been runner-up in many. He won the Cardiff International Poetry Competition. He has been runner-up in the Basil Bunting Award, the Michael Marks Award. He's been the writer in residence in Harvard Summer School. But most of all, what I've learned with this man has been a marvellous support, really a marvellous support to other writers, and actively encourage them in as many ways as possible. During that terrible year that we've been in, he set up the Plague Poets and featured a variety of poets that were brought to us all on screen, doing their work and describing their experiences in this time. So much so, he's now one of the 4 champions of poetry, looking out new work. So that is a massive thing. He's got, I think, 5 collections of poetry, and this one here is his last collection. Very keen to ask him later about his interest in Greek mythology. Also keen to ask him about his lovely use of vernacular, belittling people up the arse and things like that. I've had such a laugh reading these poems today. It's been great. So, and also, as I say, with us, we've got Lesley Benzie, whom I'm more familiar with. As you know, Lesley and I have worked together, and the small publishing house have brought out this book, Fessin Weird. If you don't have any of these books, this is Lewis Press, I would strongly recommend that you get them. Lesley had her first, I've known Lesley a long time. She's born in Aberdeen and has lived in Glasgow now for 25 years. So her language is interesting, even more so when we go for a wee drink, because she's got that lovely mix, haven't you, dear? That comes as the evening wears on, out and more out. She has 20 years ago brought a poetry collection. It was really hailed by Edwin Morgan at the time. And Lesley just tried to bring up her children and earn money and live a life, writing her poems as I've known, but it's recently in Poetry Republic have been very influential in highlighting Lesley's work in their magazine in 2019. I published her collection Fessin Weird in 2020. And since then, she's been doing really, really well, many anthologies, and she was runner-up in the McCash Prize this year, 2020. And she was highly commended in the Vernal Equinox. So we've got 2 very interesting speakers, and yeah, I hope you'll listen to the speak, or the spick, or the speak, or whatever you want to call it. I hope you'll be tuning right into the sounds this evening. And sounding off first, I'm going to hand over to Lesley Benzie, who's going to read you a couple of poems.
Hello everybody, I'm going to read this first poem, which is called Joan Airdley's Catterline. And Catterline is it's just on the northeast coast, about 30 miles from Aberdeen, and it's where Joan Airdley, the painter, spent her last days. I'm drawn to the coastal hues that Joan Airdley was wedded to in her final days before life was cut short. Though the sun shines in the pale ultramarine sky, the wind whips at the waves that begin way off at the horizon and keep coming till they've collided with the hues, sculpting them into caves and rock formations. As an afterthought, the wind scours my face. There's nae a soul around for miles, and I can sense on a dreich day, as she looked out for the watchie, the seagulls cawing could become as oppressive as the poverty of street urchins in our Glasgow slums. Further on, at the edge of Foul Shooch's precipice, the air is thick with new life. There are kittiwakes and puffins, and my favourite, the guillemots. They are perched on tiny ledges facing into the scarp, like they have come to worship at the Wailing Wa. I lean over to take a closer look, hooked in by the shimmer or the black-brown colour made famous by Van Gogh, wha Joan was often likened to. Their burnt umber plumage, like oiled velvet, with the fine white lines running frae aboon their een to the tips of their beaks, as if they've been drawn on by a wee quine, just to make them even bonnier. Like missiles, they dive to the sea and make haste their return to feed their young, for fear the fulmars will raid their nests, like the Vikings wha came afore, peppering our tongues with pagan words, and naming these foul gulls that fill the air with stinky spit. Beyond the urgent din of the birds, the heuchs themselves share millions of years in their layers of volcanic rock and reed sandstein, with pitted boulders sandwiched in atween, covered with emerald green moss that turns a shade of cadmium as it slims up the face and into other centuries, till the day when the rise of the sea lays more and more claim to their history. As I make my way back to Catterline, I find myself carrying a wee prayer for the coastline that pressed itself to Joan's heart.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Really great.
The next poem it's actually probably more of a rant than a poem, but I felt compelled after listening to a radio programme to write it. So it's called The Man Said. The man said angrily, "I like nuclear weapons. We haven't had a war for several decades because of them." He had phoned in to give the radio presenter the benefit of his wisdom. It's a modern day phenomenon that almost anybody can have their 5 minutes of celebrity. You know, the benefits of living in a democracy is you can say whatever you like, spick and spick and spick ony auld. And if you have the notion that with the internet revolution, information is available about almost ahin at the push of a button, including Britain's involvement in umpteen wars for India, Palestine, Malaya, Korea, Suez, Kenya, Cyprus, Borneo, Vietnam, Aden, Radfan, Oman, Dhofar, Northern Ireland, the Falklands War, the Gulf War, Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, down through the years into the pact with America and Iraq. But despite these facts, the man claims there's nae been a war for decades. He's clearly one of these people who has to have the truth punching him square in his face afore it penetrates the narrow gauge of his reality. Even then he denies it, for he canna bear being wrong or facing the limits of his understanding if it's really been going on all along. One of the benefits of living in a democracy is that despite the pervasive nature of information technology, you can choose to remain ignorant of whatever the government of the day does in your name. Think and say whatever you like, spick and spick and spick ony auld, and have the freedom to crowd my airwaves while I become tongue-tied and dumbfounded in the face of sick baffling logic. I'd have felt more able to respond in kind. I would have come back at him with, well, surely then your argument justifies every country in the world having them. As I said, a bit more of a rant, really. But
yeah, I think it's quite amusing there, Lesley, when you say it would justify me saying to him, every country would have them. I could hear you saying something else to that man, actually, which would sound similar to that, but not quite the same. I see you raging, really, listening to that. And just listening to that level of argument and ignorance, and I think it was a nice contrast, because the Cataline poem seems so cityscaped and in some way, I don't know why, whether the other one you've got this beautiful widescape of wind and sea and all that, and the insignificance of you somehow. I think when when the wind gives you a wee scout in the face or whatever it was you said.
Yeah.
So is that a place that you know well?
I wouldn't say I know it well, but I like going to that coast. I mean, obviously I'm from Aberdeen and I was used to being by the sea and the coastline, and it was just that poem came from, I'd recently seen some of her paintings of the you know, she did this sort of townhead slum children, and I worked in Royston where a lot of the people that she took that she painted pictures of actually ended up living. And I was walking along that coastline one day and I just remembered that her studio, the Watchy, was there, and we kind of went a really long wander. And I was just thinking about the kind of Aberdeen Glasgow connection, or the northeast Glasgow connection, and I wrote that poem and another. Well, I've got one about her living in Glasgow as well. So the other one, the raging one, yeah, I just feel really infuriated because that idea, we haven't had a war for decades. Okay, we haven't had a war on our soil, but we've been not only involved in, but, you know, very financing or provoking wars, or getting involved in attacking other countries for a long time. So nuclear weapons, there's nothing about that.
Do you think there's not enough political poems? I don't know. I mean, you say it's a rant, but it serves a purpose, doesn't it? I mean, do you think people shy away in this country from addressing political issues in poetry? I think they do.
I think, well, I've had people say to me when I've done poems like that, that's not really a poem, is it? And I mean, in the terms of, there's not much in the way of metaphor and simile and all of that sort of thing, but I probably agree. I mean, why can't we write poems about politics? I mean, it's something that affects our lives all the time, every minute of the day, even if it's not in our vision. That you know, it's really fundamental to how we end up living our lives and the kind of history that we create. So yeah, I think people still tend to think of things like, you know, I wander lonely as a cloud, and that type of thing as a poem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Poets Republic magazine that featured you, Lesley, has also a Poets React sort of platform, which I think is unique, in that poets who have a response to make for some, you know, to some political problem or atrocity or whatever, can simply go on there, you know, and put their poem on. I think it's a necessary thing, isn't it? We need to, because I think poetry has become distance in a sense from real problems sometimes.
Yeah, and I think if you think of Scotland's history, Robert Burns, the Irish poets, they were all politically inclined and engaged, really. And I think what it is people look at them because it's in the past. I think there's a discomfort when people hear poems of that type sometimes. So therefore they might have some kind of reaction like you found, Lesley. But I think that discomfort comes from maybe not want to go to a poetry evening and remind themselves of the newspapers, you know. It's like people who don't like Brecht plays, they don't want to have the facts. They don't want to hear about it, you know. And some people, sadly, would see poetry evenings, or not many now. I think it's changed a lot. So they're happy to look at background like Burns and wax on. He was a very, very political poet. So was lots of others. But they're in a different time, so they'll read that happily. Whereas if they're going and listening to poems that are reacting to what's happening now, I think sometimes it gives people a wee bit of a kick up the butt to think, well, what are you doing, or how do you feel about it, you know? Maybe they just don't want to go there. I don't know. But I think it's very, very important. It's acute, actually, at the moment in the world we're living in. Yeah.
Well, it's funny how people embrace Burns's poetry, you know, a man's a man for all that and all the rest of it, and say they're wholeheartedly, you know, in favour of that and all the rest of it, you know, but don't address contemporary issues that spring from that. It's the whole Burns problem as far as Scotland's concerned, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Great. So we're going to go on, and I'm looking forward now to inviting Hugh to read a couple of his poems, and over to you, Hugh.
Aye, what am I reading again?
I think you were going to read Nay Nemesis and the Marguerite. We've just been talking about the Marguerite. We love it, but I think you would read it too.
Okay, this is Ne Nemesis, which is I've always felt that the Greek myths, which I've written a whole series of poems about the Greek myths, and some of them channeled through paintings of them as well. But it seems to me the Greek gods were obviously as misogynistic as the Greeks, and this is about this really. It's about Philomela being changed into a nightingale rather than being changed into some sort of proper nemesis. Ne Nemesis. Have I wondered why Philomela didn't change to a bear and bite off Teresa's bows? Or a bull who micht have bluttered them so far up his ears to the lant in his mouth for breakfast? No, that he could have had any with his head hanging off after yon leopards could have been got hold of him. Well, lasses were killed, forced or rent apart, plucked their own een out or leapt over cliffs. Yon sewer sure of bastards, the Greek gods, moont around browsing through the Olympian guide to flora and fauna, matching the roll call the deed to dowly soons and nightingales, wee trees or licht-hearted weather formations. Women turned into birdsang, so poetry loving hoplites could screeve some verse between rap and murder. And this is Margaret Ducos, one of my favourite Scottish historical characters. A girl that was married for her dowry was Scottish soldiers during the 100 Years' War. The Scots invested hugely on the side of the French against the English during the 100 Years' War. And Margaret was only interested apparently in writing poetry, but she was much a figure of contempt in the French court. Not just because of that, but because of her sort of the uncouth Northerners, good enough to die for them, but not good enough to sort of be part of their civilized society. Margaret Ducos. Margaret Stewart wrote poetry every evening. She was loved for it by a few, but to most of the courtiers, she was the butt of jokes. They laughed at her clothes, her diet, her manners, but most of all, her desire to write, as if a teenager from the savage north could have noble fancies and the skill and wit to pen them. Her husband hated her, married her for her dowry of Scottish troops, tore her verses up when she died. He was a successful king, in other words, a brutal thug with libraries of books written about him, but she is remembered in the vague and beautiful ways that matter to some, in scraps and stories that might be dreams. They say the master writer Alain Chartier, France's finest, had a vision where she graced him with a poet's kiss. Several paintings have been done of that poet's kiss.
Yeah. That's a beautiful verse at the end. But I love that one also about he was a successful king. In other words, a brutal thug. That's brilliant.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah, that's it. That's how he became a successful king.
Yeah.
I've always thought the old alliance, right? Everybody talks about the old alliance. Fiddle de dee. Never worked for the Scots, the old alliance. Always worked for the French. Never for the Scots, right? We sacrificed thousands of troops, several kings, and they gave us the word for a plate, I think.
I thought was interesting as well, the analogy, I don't want to do that, because you're on the borderlands there, but, that whole thing about the savage North and all that, the writers from the North, the savage North, couldn't actually have the grace and the delicateness, of the court. I just think that could be translated.
That was a political thing. Alain Chartier, who was a French poet, sort of regarded her. I mean, culture will out. I think. I hope, but she was thought of as she thought it was a political experience, really, wasn't she?
Yeah. I think what's lovely in both of these poems, Hugh, is that kind of flitting in registers and content. I love that. And I see it in a lot of your poems. These kind of almost, it's not quite rhetoric, but like high blown scenarios, and then, as I say, with somebody getting bluttered, his balls up his back into his mouth. I mean, it's actually hilarious. It's just that wonderful combination of context and then the kind of language of today and the vernacular getting flung in there. Do you do
really
that?
nice. Write that down, and I'll write that down. I'll put it in the back of a book. That's really good.
I wanted to ask why you decided to do it in Scots. Hugh.
Well, I was going to ask you some of these questions as well about why you choose Scots and some verses and not. I don't know. What do you think yourself?
Well, I was going to agree with Linda there that I mean, obviously you're talking about something that is, the Greek gods were totally misogynist. This was a violent rape and mutilation of Philomela. But I suppose the two things that I felt were kind of coming in there was the Scots made it really gory and visceral, but it also added to the kind of the humor of, I mean, it's a really, you're talking about something really serious, but it's hilarious, and it's made partly hilarious by the Scots. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe makes it more accessible to people.
Yep. And humor is the best way. I mean, in the Greek thing, humor and tragedy together, and satire, exactly what that is. It's kind of a satirical way of writing, that is just undermining that whole thing through humor. And Billy Connolly, anybody's done it, any subject to take, that's what they do.
Scots kind of people's language, isn't it? I mean, that's as you say, the visceral, but there's no reason why every single sentiment that you can come up with, shouldn't be written in Scots as well. You know what I mean? I mean, do you not feel, Lesley, maybe that or Linda, there's a kind of way of people are sort of typecasting Scots. Writing Scots, if you write and you want to write humorous stuff, if you want to write what people say in the bus to you, if you want to write about, as you say yourself, you want to talk brutal things up folks' arses and stuff. Yeah, but Scots should be the language where you write every single verse.
I agree. There's a tendency to think it should be like humorous or couthy. And a couple of times folk have commented, oh, it's really interesting that you write about political things in Scots. I've been at a couple of writers groups where people have mentioned that, and I totally agree. It should be something that you're. The first reason I started writing at all was because I missed speaking. I mean, my accent's changed, but I missed speaking my Scots. And when you speak about things, you speak about everything. You don't just speak about couthy subjects or, funny subjects. But there's something about the Scots in that poem. It really adds to it, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole thing with that's like Kelman's argument for using the everyday, the colloquial or the dialect, whatever, that it shouldn't be something that's getting used in inverted commas, talking, receive the English, and then all of a sudden it came out with his wee dog and all this kind of thing, or Julie piece out the window and all that. He just said, no, I want the narrative voice of all of it to be the God voice. The omniscient narrator should be the God voice, but actually we don't speak Scots all the time. But I mean, there's a really nice mix, and I think that should be evidenced as well. I think when you hear you speaking, Lesley, as I say, because of that, Glasgow, lovely interest for you with Joan Eardley as well, the Glasgow and the Townhead, and then the Aberdeen thing. So, the language is a living thing, it's moving all the time, but it pisses me right off when people say to me, you've got a doctorate in literature and you're fucking and blazing away there all the time and talking like that, have you left Paisley behind? And I'm like, what? As if language is something that, goes along with whatever class or education you have. And as you say, I can easily, and I've heard people saying it, serious subjects in the vernacular of Scots are not treated seriously because of that. I think that's changing, though, I have to say. I think that is changing.
Yeah.
I hope so. I think I'm inexperienced in Scots. That's why I don't write Scots all the time. I've only really recently begun to write in Scots, although I've spoken the way I've spoken all my life. Mm-hmm. But I've always written in English, I have to say. But I mean, that's the reason. But there's no reason why Scots shouldn't be employed through the whole range of your poetry, I don't think. But
the mix is nice as well. It allows access, because some folk, it can be a wee bit off-putting, even though if they heard you saying it, they would get it. But if they see it written down for whatever reason. So I think it's free because we have that mix. We speak in English, we speak in more Scots. So, you've done it as well, Lesley. Your books are a mix, aren't they?
The first one was totally in Doric, but that's because that's what inspired me to start writing, was the desire to use that language in my head. But the second book, obviously, because there's 20 years gap, and I've lived in Glasgow. I mean, I had to change the way I spoke, because when I first came, I was off at like Fuyudi and Faryagan, and I'll maybe tell you a funny story at the end when I was working in the drug rehab about the misunderstandings of my language and the Glaswegian language when I was first working there.
Go on, tell us now, go on.
I'll tell you later, but
tell us now.
Come on.
Well, everybody commented if I couldn't get on a bus or a taxi without somebody saying, "Oh, you're no from here, are you? That sounds like a wee northeast coast," and blah blah blah. So anyway, I was working at my first job in Glasgow. I was working at a drug rehab, and they were all taking the piss the whole time about how I spoke and everything. And I'm thinking to myself, they're all going around, "Gonna geese a tea and where you got?" and all this kind of stuff. And I'd be like, they're taking the piss out of me. Anyway, one day we were all sitting there, and this lassie was saying to me for about the third time this week, "Do you stay in a boat house?" And I'm going, why do they keep asking me if I live in a boathouse? And so eventually I said, "Why do you keep asking me if I live in a boathouse?" And obviously that was the thing. I was the butt of the joke for about the next month. Because I'm thinking, why did they think I would live in a boathouse? But they thought this was the funniest thing out. Anyway.
Must tell you my joke about Sanka before. Right.
Okay.
Somebody I knew had lives the outskirts of Sanka and was wheeling their newly born child through the streets of Sanka, and this old lady came and poked her head over the pram and said, "Oh, what a lovely Wayne. What you called it?" And she said, "Nathan." And the woman said, "Nathan, you'll hear call it something."
I know, but what we've got now, I was thinking, Lesley, is because there's a lot of money now for Scots to be developed, you've got it's like back to wee Jimmy, wee Bunnet and all that. You've got people with Kelvin side, with proper, not Scots accents at all, but because they're getting the money, they're on hoots manor, and the noise off them is hellish. I mean, they're all trying to reinvent themselves speaking Scottish because it's became a wee bit fashionable at the moment, our money's coming at it's probably no the reason. Anyway, that was a lovely wee chin wag. But I thought it'd be nice to hear a couple more poems, and I was thinking maybe Lesley, if you would read your next two poems, it'd be lovely.
Okay. Here's the book. I've thrown the book aside so far that I couldn't find it there. Okay, so this poem, you mentioned earlier, Hugh, about the kind of political poems, and I suppose this is another political poem, this time written in English. And I felt it was, although I wrote it last year for the 70th anniversary of the Nakba, I felt, given the situation in Gaza and Palestine at the moment, it felt kind of really relevant to read it. So it's called Who's Celebrating This 70th Anniversary? Mohammed scrunches his eyes to gaze at the forever blue of the sky above the razor wire fence. He can feel his quickening breath moisten the black and white kaffaye he uses to hide his head and face. At 19, he has no prospect of a job, and in the living space he shares with his mother, father, sister, and brother, he sleeps most of the day. It's better, he says, than just staring into the abyss of the future. He is there to protest. His anger, like the hot stone in his hand, has become heavy as he places it in the sling, anticipating the Tzahal in full battle fatigues on the other side of the fence. Some only evidenced by their military helmets and bullpup assault rifles rising above their sniper range positions. Across the divide, coloured kites blaze with lines set to ensnare the MQ-9 Reaper drones, defending their place in the world. David vacillates between counting down the days to a life beyond military combat, to an others like today, as he eyes Muhammad, his anger like the Jewish skin once stretched across a lampshade frame, is taut with a burning desire to avenge over 2 millennia of persecution, which culminated in pyres of tangled bodies with twisted death throes baked into their bones and faces in kilns filled with the poison gas of hatred to ensure never again. Forged from Zionist dreams and the British government's broken promises, the Jewish state of Israel became a shining beacon of freedom on one side of the fence. On the other, Muhammad is pent up by illegal Israeli expansion, walls and settlements. Contaminated drinking water, a slow contagion like the quasi-religious polemic justifying the means, and a fundamentalist commitment to the US alliance, which provides enough military funding to fulfill Kahan's dream of for every Jew a 22, armed to the teeth so that no one can argue with them for fear of being branded anti-Semitic. While live ammunition ricochets around him, Muhammad begins to swing his slingshot, slowly at first, and then with a furious momentum. And
Powerful.
That's good. That's good. This poem, actually, it was you, Hugh, that asked me to be involved in the Dead Good Scots project and to write a short poem about a dead good Scot. So I've written this poem for Sandy Craigie, who was born in 1963 and died in 2005, and very sadly at her own hand. So this is for Sandy. Tossing convention aside with her rowdy hair, she dubbed herself an Edinburgh whore, claiming she wanted to be a great fuck rather than a good friend, but a' the same she wasn't. Despite her street protests and her anarchic belly laugh. Her blue lips never mentioned sisterhood, but weel she lived it, passed around like a wee bunnily shite, her poetry innate wi' blistering insight, taut as an unpulled pin o' a grenade. Captive to its bite, she saw death in life's smile and kissed it.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
So I think you wanted to ask Lesley about the tour they did.
I tell us about the whole thing, Lesley. I'm always intrigued about it because was it first conceived in sort of Glasgow? Did it happen in Glasgow before it went to New York? Yeah.
It was conceived in Glasgow. It was the brainchild, really, of Margaret McQuaid McCausland, and so there was Margaret McQuaid McCausland, Sandy Craigie, myself, and God, that's terrible, Thompson. It'll come back to me. I was thinking about her today, Karen Thompson. And we also had a video filmmaker that came with us as well. So she was tacked on at the end as the Sassenach too. So it was very focused around the idea of, at that time, there wasn't a lot of women writing, I suppose, fairly kind of out there poems of a feminist nature. And so Margaret applied to the Scottish Arts Council, provided a wee bit of biog about us all and some poems, and we were granted the money. She knew some people in New York as well, so and we came up with a name of 2 Ouija's, 1 Quine and an Edinburgh whore, and as I say, the Sassenach joined a bit later, and we went over and did various readings, but the intention was also to kind of chart how we were while we were there and make, write poems, take films, and come back and do a wee bit a tour and an exhibition, and obviously and a publication when we came back. So the publication was various poems about our experience, and also conversation and interviews that we with each other as part of the tour.
What year was that, Lesley?
Oh God, I think it was the year before I think it was the year before my Sewn Up came out, but I think it came out the same year. The publication and on the exhibition when we came back was the same year.
2000 or something like that.
I think it was 1999 or 19 somewhere around.
Does this video exist, Lesley?
You know, I was even, because you were asking about it, I know that I've got some of the publications and some stuff to do with it, and I cannot find. I have got it somewhere, cannot find it for the.
Get out.
Well, we're final night of readings. We were in Harlem doing some readings. We went to some university, but our final night was in the New Eurekan Poetry Cafe, and obviously we're all doing poems in the vernacular. I don't know if if they knew what had hit them, because there was a lot of kind of people acting like they were rappers, but they couldn't sing in Eurekan Poetry Cafe. So I think we were a very particular novelty. But
that video has to be found, Benzie. It must be found.
It's a brilliant experience, I have to say.
Is there no one that got it? Is Margaret or somebody who got it?
I'd probably have to get in touch with her. I don't even know where she is at the moment, but I'll see if I can get in touch with her. I mean,
be a great video if you could find it, Lesley. It really would.
I bet you had such a laugh as well. I mean, you're saying they had a hoop, but you must have been mayhem arriving in the cafe. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Also, was it not a kind of groundbreaker? Because I mean, lots of people have come after that, but I mean, that must have been quite innovative, was it not?
I think at that time it wasn't really being done particularly, that poets were going off on a tour, you know, across the.
No, not just that, but women vernacular poets, you know.
Well, there wasn't really. I mean, to be honest, you know, it was a fairly male-dominated environment, and I think we were regarded as a bit scandalous at times.
Never.
And doing the kind of poems that we were doing. So yeah.
Good stuff.
What's the name? God, I'm getting old. I can't remember anything now. That article in the Poets Republic in 2019
by Maggie Gibson.
Maggie Gibson, God. It was commenting on what a male-dominated landscape it was. So
absolutely.
And that poets likes of us, the four of us, were all from a kind of working class sort of background, and trying to talk about the everyday things that impacted, which again wasn't really, you know, that wasn't poetry really.
I remember Sandy Craigie well from the hotel. Was it West? What was the hotel in Edinburgh that used to have these readings every Friday night?
It's something
West End Hotel, the West End
Hotel. Because
I remember her from there.
And she's
a great force of nature, wasn't she? Yeah,
just brilliant.
Terrible loss. You often wonder what somebody like that would be doing now. You know what I mean? Because here you bring your book out and people are still doing their stuff. Anyway, we're going to move on and hear these wonderful poems from yourself, Hugh. I think you're beautiful.
I'm going to nip to this cupboard and get my Palestinian poem, one of my Palestinian poems in response to Leslie's. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember you coming back for that tour. You'd short hair at the time, spiky hair. I kind of remember it. And that was the same time was like Maggie Gibson and Janet Paisley and myself. We did the Wild Women tour. I did the music, and they were so that it was noticeable because it wasn't that many women out there doing that kind of thing. You know, it's so different now. It's great.
Yeah. Change days.
Thank goodness. Yeah. So I was maybe going to ask for a waiting list if you read another week. Oh no, there's Hugh back. He's back.
Okay.
I'm back. I'm back. I can't find it though, but I'll do the other one. It's complete atrocity what's going on in Gaza just now, isn't it? It's absolutely terrible. Drunk Muse Press, which I'm involved in, is bringing out a book at the end of May. I don't know if you've seen this, by the Palestinian poet that was locked up for writing that poem, "Resist, My People Resist."
Yeah.
Anyway, this is about a poem about a girl who's shot at an Israeli checkpoint. It's called Danya Ershid on her way home from school. I imagine my beautiful 13-year-old, her head filled with fantasy novels, irony, her face pasted on the blue screen of the future, standing at a checkpoint while soldiers root through her bag and empty the contents: school books, tampons, a pencil case, a key ring, some small tubes of makeup from Superdrug on the ground. She raises her arms and says, "I have no knife," in a confused, surprised tone, annoyed too, because she doesn't suffer fools gladly. And then she is shot 8 times and left face down in the dust to bleed to death, while her killers shoulder arms and jabber on their mobile phones. It is easy to imagine, and likewise impossible. Injustice rolls on like some juggernaut too loud and lurid to challenge. As I read and write this, my lager on the table, an autumn night settling outside, the staff of the pub are sticking skeletons in glass, preparing for Halloween.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember that incident, actually. I remember that incident, and a friend of mine had been over there, and not long before that, and he was so shocked because he recognised the place, and he was just saying that, the oppressor becoming the oppressed becoming the oppressor big time, because he was saying it was like plastic tunnels that people going into Gaza, would have to go through if they were going into work, and it was like airport terminals for the people from Israel.
Unbelievable.
He said he was looking, and they were hitting him with sticks to move along, move along, move along. And he is Jewish, his family Jewish, and he was absolutely horrified when he came back. And he wasn't back long when that happened. And he said he could have seen that happen any time from what he was witnessing, in the tunnel bit next. He thought that could have happened any day. But that was a great poem. And I thought, actually, see, when you just take it back to you, sitting on an autumn evening, sometimes it's almost impossible to accept the comfort of your situation when you realise the hellishness that some people are daily living through,
Yeah, it was a really powerful poem, Hugh.
Right.
You do wonder, though, what writing a poem, what effect it has, eh? I mean, you feel absolutely outraged and impotent with rage, and what do you do? Write a poem.
Well, you read poetry, you go places, you get it round, and what I've found is sometimes people read poetry and it makes people readdress their thoughts of that, and that's the most important thing. I mean, now in Scotland, I think poetry is it's really, and that girl at the inauguration of Biden has set a whole thing afield as well, and I think, Colombia and places like that, in South America, poets can be, they have been jailed and tortured and everything because of their influence, but I think the most important thing is just to make people rethink something, or maybe go back into that, or take a wee check on where they are.
I can though identify with that feeling of impotence as well, but I suppose the sort of thing that kind of makes me want to do it and want other people to do it is, if you watch the TV news, they're presenting the situation in Gaza, in Palestine, as if it's a war of two equals. It's being presented in completely out of context by the West because we're supporting what Israel is doing. And I think, even if there's a few voices trying to say something different, I think it's really, I feel it like it's the only, if it's the only thing you can do.
You need to say it yourself anyway, don't you? Even if it's for nobody else, you need to say it yourself.
Yeah.
What would you do if you didn't? If you've got that in your heart and you've got that in your mind, it's even more impotent if you do nothing. And I think that poem you read, when you're talking about that, you know, completely imbalanced presentation by the BBC News and most of the Western outlets, you had a brilliant, you know, the slingshot and the wee boy lying in his bed looking into no future. And then you've got that entire Western side funded and all the weaponry in there, you know, that's it. You know, that was a real clear sense of reminding people in case they forgot when they're listening to the nonsense that we get fed, you know. Anyway, Hugh, can you go on and let us hear a couple of these other positioning?
I'll read this marked one. This is my favourite poem of all time.
I love it. Love it.
I do like it, and it rhymes as well. You know, unlike nearly all the others. Anyway,
is Lynn McGarr a kid on name, or is she hiding somewhere?
No, she's a kid on name. I changed her name so that you know, she wouldn't be tracked down by the SQA and assassinated. Anyway, so it's called Marked. Lynn McGarr, I am marking your exam in the bar. It's a highly unethical thing. My own experience confirms that 10 pints can leave in tatters the critical apparatus. I've no choice, Lynn McGarr. I have taken on 1,000 papers so that myself and Jane can go on our honeymoon to Spain. I have to mark them constantly on the bus, at the toilet, in my sleep. It is a hard and desperate life, McG. I suspect you would concur with me. And the pub is not so bad. Summer stabs through little slats of window, corkscrews of dust glow, dance in their spotlights, rich gantry greens and ambers ignite. Are you in the sun, Lynn McGarr? Is it sparking concretes in Craigmillar? I see, Lynn McGarr, you think Asquith was murdered by Emily Pankhurst in 1903. After another pint, I am tempted to agree. His later photographs show a corpse-like pallor. And Trotsky, you say, overthrew Stalin. Credit will always be given to valid pieces of wishful thinking. And your response to the triple entente, who cares? Seems sublime, succinct, though it's not in the marking scheme. And I like the way you dot the I in Lynn, like a little bubble hovering in space above the mediocrity of name and place. It is strange how fate has done us in. If I had my way, Lynn, people like you and I would stride out on the byways of history like giants. Life has other plans for you, me too, perhaps. In the meantime, for what it's worth, full marks.
That's because I've had that experience, you know, for years of teaching. I remember saying to one student that phoned me up and said, you know, I've sent you my stuff. And I said, look, I'm going to the toilet and there's fucking hands coming up the bowl, handing me essays. I've had it, we're looking at stuff. But I absolutely loved it, the way you and her became the same. The more pints have been down,
of course. Well, we are the same. That poem was rejected by the Scottish Poetry Library's little book for teachers because it was thought to. Well, it wasn't the Scottish Poetry Library that was rejected. It was the teachers' union that rejected it because they felt it would discourage new teachers coming through. That cynical sort of feeling that, you know, who the fuck cares? Basically, yeah.
So is it history you taught or politics?
History.
Fantastic. I love that, the triple entente. And then the wee girl just getting in. I think the wee girl's bubble above her name felt to me like the circular dust.
Well, I changed McGarr, but Lynn with a bubble above that was her real name.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I love that. And it was like that beautiful observation of the light coming in and the corkscrew and the dust motes. I could just see that, the imagery.
Well, that's what you get through hanging about in bars all the time. That's you appreciate these tinctures and these shades. Yeah.
The green in the gantry.
Yeah, you've been there, Lesley. You've been there.
Twice.
So yeah. Please read us the positioning one as well, because we've read it and
do you want to do that? Okay.
It's lovely.
Right, positioning 3 words in a poem. While the broadband is being strummed by all the air guitarists, I'm sitting among the flowers considering the positioning of 3 words in a poem. I'm positioning 3 words in a poem while blackbirds leave questions in the air and Brian, the cat next door, turns blank eyes to the cloudless sky. The positioning of 3 words in a poem is not hard work, or work at all, really. It is like imagining 3 drops of water on a leaf. Any order would do, or any leaf. I think positioning 3 words in a poem on this day pretending to be summer is like a Renaissance painting. The hermit crouched over his gnomic text while through the window behind the whole world writhes in a dazzle of war or plague. Or in fact, maybe it's like opening the mind with 3 perfectly milled keys. So I see the Argolid or Anguri, the light and the sea smoking between the pines, and that somehow enters the poem too, and infuses each word I'm positioning with a different meaning. So a new poem builds up marvelously around them, like scaffolding in the sun, and that poem speaks, as all do, of love. I'm confident that these 3 very ordinary words I'm positioning in this poem are now sacred words, in the order I imagined them or any other, and I will leave them here on the grass for now, in this circle of light.
That's a beautiful ending, a really beautiful ending. Yeah.
So how do you go about, see when you're putting a poem like that together, I mean, it's the trinity of 3, do you write instantly or do you work it all out?
Search me. I've no fucking idea. Actually, that one, I wrote it in the back garden during a sort of semi decent day last June, and I thought the actual end. I felt when I wrote it all in one day. I wrote it all in an hour, although I tinkered with wee bits of it, but essentially it was written all in an hour. And I thought the end was a bit of a cop out. Actually, I felt that it wasn't the best ending that I could have done, but you know, I don't know. But I quite like it.
It really works, the ending. I'm interested to hear you, Hugh, saying how I don't know how these poems come about. They just happen because
search me.
Well, because some of them, like reading the Marguerite de Cos and the Ne Nemesis. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of historical knowledge and I mean, obviously, we're a history teacher, but some of this you must be researching, or there must be something that comes to you. You decide, okay, I'm inspired.
I do like the history stuff. I've written loads and loads of history poems. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've written a lot of Scottish history poems, and have got one hopefully coming out this autumn, a book of Scots history poems in Scots. So I mean, I'm very interested in that and looking at particular issues in history. Not to make a point, but generally to take the piss out of it. Actually, it's not actually meant to be like that, but that's sometimes how it is. So I do that. But that 3 words in a poem thing came from, I don't know where that came from, but and that's a good thing about being a poet, isn't it, folks? I mean, sometimes you get these kind of things that suddenly appear from left field, or it starts off with something and then it builds to something really good, you know, unlike most things, which starts off with something and builds to really crap.
Well, how do you research your work, Lesley, or how do you do it? I mean, I know you have to look out detail and things like that. When do you know it's enough for too much?
Well, that's kind of partly why I was asking Hugh, because obviously there is a lot of historical detail and some of that you maybe just trips off your brain, or you kind of think, oh, I want to write about that and go and research it. I think in the past, I used to just think or feel something about something or get annoyed about something or be struck by something. And either I would have some knowledge about it or I would go away and study about it and find a bit more about it. Recently, because I've been asked to do a few things and I'm writing quite a bit more, I find myself doing quite a bit more research and I'm enjoying it, but I have to rein myself in a little bit because you can just end up going all over the place. And I think, right, okay, this is what I was trying to do with this poem, or this is the kind of meaning of this poem. So I'm not going to read another 65 pages of something on. So sometimes you have to rein yourself in, or you don't actually get any writing done. So yeah, I have to think, what am I trying to say in this poem, and kind of limit how far I go with it.
And also that thing that Hugh was saying there about something comes to your left field. You know, you've already got something came in either for your life or what you looked at. And as you say, if you go away and research too much, sometimes you can end up with something that might have worked really well, but you can maybe get far away from that original.
And you can get too caught up in facts as well. How many facts or how many how many things you need to be saying about this to get the meaning. And then I often find what I do is I end up like that, and then I have to pare a whole pile of it out.
Yeah.
You got to remember that history is mostly made up. So I mean, aye. And I like the wee tangential things that you find out when you're doing research. Like I don't know if you know about Rudyard Kipling's niece who tried to blow up Burns's cottage in Alloway. Did you?
Well,
see, that's the kind of thing that you find out, right? It's really, really fascinating. She cycled all the way up from Gloucester or whatever with two essentially what were pipe bombs, and she tried to blow up Burns's cottage in Alloway, and she was caught, unfortunately, because there was a curator on site, because there's this obsession with Burns, obviously, that right from the word when he was born, there was a fucking curator there. Anyway, she was caught, so she didn't blow the place up, and she was arrested.
Why did she was arrested? Why did she want to do that?
Because she felt it was she was a suffragette. She felt it would be a sort of big public sort of demonstration of votes for women.
Okay.
And so she was arrested and went to Ayr Sheriff Court, where she, with great largesse, paid the fines of every woman that appeared in front of the sheriff that day. And became a kind of local hero. She was imprisoned in Glasgow, went on hunger strike immediately, and then was released. And that's a fascinating and brilliant story, isn't it? And that's kind of, I do like that kind of thing rather than the boring old grind of supposed facts,
Have you written a poem about Rudyard Kipling's niece?
Well, somebody wrote a play about it, so I feel that I don't want to. So, but I'm tempted, but haven't done it yet. But it's a great story, isn't it?
It's a brilliant story.
Yeah. I was wondering if she'd been one of his concubines in a trip south, and she was coming to get her comeuppance on him. But that's even more interesting that she was doing it as a kind of suffragette business.
Yeah, no, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah. So one of the things I thought we would maybe kind of finish talking about a wee bit, if you fancied it, was, I know everybody is a wee bit, but this lockdown opportunities, lockdown limitations. I know you hate it, the Zoom thing, Lesley. I not quite hate it, but it's not your favourite. But I think one of the things that I've noticed is that I'm on board with people talking about Brighton now. I'm going to things in Wales, I'm just about to bring in Melbourne Poetry Group if I can, just get the times right for that. So I suppose these are maybe some of the opportunities, but the glaring obvious limitations have just been palpable in the room with human beings. As well, you read your poetry, must be both of you affected by that, I would say.
Well, I mean, as you say, it's not my favourite thing, and maybe that's partly because I'm a counsellor for the NHS, and I spend, video conference meeting after video conference meeting, dealing with people, and it doesn't, writing and going out to read your writing is well, it normally feels like a very different thing, and now obviously reading the poetry is a different thing, but the kind of medium for me means it's kind of
a
little bit like that. And also just the absence of people. And the other thing, I know you can switch off the Zoom camera, but I'm sick of looking at my own face in the corner of every. But yeah, you're right. There probably is a lot of people being able to share stuff in different parts of the country without having to travel anywhere. And the other thing that lockdown made me do was write more. Although I haven't put a lot out, I've been writing a lot more.
That's great. What about you, Hugh? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think the same. I think I've written more. I mean, and I had that Plague of Poems project, but I quite like kind of Zoom things in that obviously the poet's head fills the screen, but it's the wee boxes along the top that I get intrigued with, like what's going on in each of these, who's drinking a bottle of gin, is that a cat there, is that someone that's just fallen off the settee? That's far more interesting than this giant poet's head. So that's no, I've quite enjoyed Zoom readings from that point of view, yeah.
So have you got some readings set up live yet, Hugh? I mean, I've booked 8 gigs now, and I'm just living in hope that they'll all happen between music and, you know, my kind of.
Well, we've got this the Poets Republic Drunk Muse thing. I'm meant to be having this wee gathering in July, and you pair are going, you not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good.
Well.
Where's the bells on? I tell you that.
That is excellent, excellent. Where are you staying? Are you staying in the Station Hotel?
The Royal Hotel, just on the beach. And my family and pals from Inverbervie are coming, so that'll be a right.
There we go. There we go. Well, that'll be a great laugh. So that's the first one really that I'm going to hope. I hope. Yeah. So see you there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, listen, this has been a lovely, very informal, and these poets, folks, what do you think? Hugh McMillan and Lesley Benzie. So remember, go out and buy their books, support them, and write poetry. If you've never written poetry, give it a go. Write political poetry, say something, do something, and be like Hugh and watch who's fallen off their couch. That's what I'm remembering. Who fell off?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's always somebody falling off their chair.
I actually think you might be quite mad. I'm loving it. I'm definitely after the gathering, go up reads. All right. But listen, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody watching this film, and thanks for Poets Time. And thanks again very much to Hugh McMillan from down there in Penpoint, and to Lesley Benzie round the corner. I wish you lived nearer, Hugh, because Lesley and I are just going to meet and probably drink a couple of wines in the local park.
Bloody hell, we'll have one for me.
Oh, don't worry.
Aye.
Right, so we'll see you up there in the gathering.
See you in Stonehaven. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for having us, Linda. Nice to see you again, Hugh.
Yeah, thank you, Linda.
See you soon.
See you soon.
See you later. Bye.